I'm sure a few other people will be trickling in, and I'm sure that some people are also on vacation, but we'll make sure this recording gets out there on YouTube as well. But we have Josh Hobine. Am I saying that right?
Close, Holbein, but that's okay
Hobine.
because
Okay.
nobody gets it right.
Right. I know. My whole name, well, actually, my maiden name was a lot harder to pronounce, but people never get my first name right either. It's Talon, but some may say Dan today. Um, Anyway, he is from Centrix IT, and you are the information security lead, if I'm
Yep,
correct.
that
Perfect.
is correct.
Awesome. So he's going to be going over aligning to a framework. So covering all of your bases when it comes to cybersecurity best practices and regulatory compliances. So I'm going to let him take it away, and you can go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. So, got some slides to go over, but definitely will make it interactive. If you guys have any questions at any time, just please raise your hand or shout them into the void, throw them into the chat, and we'll have some fun. So, let me share my screen and get started. There we go. All right. So, first off, we'll do a little introduction. So, yes, I'm the information security lead over here at Centrix IT. But other than that, probably wondering who the heck is this guy? Little background information about me. I have either worked in tech or restaurants my entire life since being 14. I've had a few other odd jobs thrown in, but that is my life. Best Buy and Geek Squad was my first tech job, but it was really more of a sales gig. But then I got into some call center work where I did tech support for an internet service provider and a prepaid cell phone company. And yes, I have plenty of call center stories if you guys want to hear them. Eventually becoming a team manager there. From there, I started at my first MSP in 2012. And in between MSP work, since 2012, I decided to dip back into the restaurant world. Did have a good reason at the time, but that's a story for a different day. Worked my way to being general manager of the store and then also being a part of the store opening team where I opened 4 stores and assisted other stores in the franchise to improve their operational efficiency. Since doing all that work isn't enough, I balance it out with my hobbies. I used to play disc golf at the professional level. Fun fact, my senior paper in high school was actually about how that was going to be my career. I was going to live in a van down by the river and travel around being the best disc golfer there was. Clearly, that didn't work out. I also used to weigh about 400 pounds, and I've lost a considerable amount of weight. Put some of it back on, unfortunately, but a part of that I've discovered a love for running and trail running. And since I can't half-ass anything, I found the world of ultra running, and I have more ultra running finishes than I do 5K finishes. Outside of that, if that's not enough, I also have a wife and 3 beautiful children. So yes, I'm always busy, but now that you guys have my life story, let's go ahead and move on. So we are talking about cybersecurity frameworks. What is a security framework and what do we need one? Sure, you can just start implementing security. You can buy some tools, throw them together, have your stack. But just like in a restaurant where you can, throw ingredients together, clean some counters and call it good, it doesn't really align you to anything and it's a little bit disjointed. So, any franchise restaurant, if you're a part of, is going to have recipes, cleaning lists, checklists, requirements to pass corporate audits and health inspections. Those are the regulatory requirements for that industry. But for the most part, MSPs, we don't have any regulatory requirements yet. If you ask George E.P. Box, a British statistician, he said all models are wrong, but some are useful. There's so many frameworks out there and more being built, redone. So the first question is, well, what cybersecurity framework should you use? Well, that answer is the one that is useful for you and your business needs. The fact that any cybersecurity program needs to adhere to a risk framework to be successful. You've probably heard CIS and NIST are the most common. The maturity model that I'll be talking about today is based off of the CIS version 8 controls, which are broken into 18 different controls with 153 safeguards. We found that by meeting a high maturity model on those CIS benchmarks, it's very easy to crosswalk to specific regulatory requirements because, again, no matter what model you follow, there is a base level of cyber controls that are the same across most all frameworks. But we're going to make this simplified. So, how we are accomplishing this, the whole goal of this maturity model is to simplify meeting these requirements by focusing on solutions that build off of each other. If you was want in on a secret, most clients won't really give a shit about CIS, NIST, or ABDC controls. If you say, hey, we're going to align you to there, usually doesn't mean anything. They want their stuff to work and to be secure. But we, as the service providers, still need a process to ensure these things work and secure, and they're going to involve all three of these domains. So we're talking about people, of who is doing it, the process of what we're doing, and the technology, of course, as what tools we are using. Looking at the maturity journey, our goal of aligning ourselves and our clients to that is to be in that sweet spot. As we know, too low of a maturity and they're in the negligence threshold and they pose a greater risk, and they might not qualify for cyber insurance, have a higher level of probability of being a successful compromise, slew of other problems. But on the other hand, as we apply high level security controls, the cost associated with them and the added process can potentially be too costly for the risk that it's covering. I've lived in the Dakotas my entire life, so I have to make a farm reference. You wouldn't build a $10,000 fence to protect a $2,000 cow. At some point, some of these controls might not make sense. So going forward, this is the actual maturity model that I've mentioned a few times. This chart here is what we show, and it shows what each of the areas of those people, process, and technology looks like at each maturity level. And then as you can see, each area needs to be worked on equally. If you remember back to when you were 16, you just passed your driving test. Let's say you cash in all your Bitcoin or whatever the new crypto coin is, and you go buy a sports car. Probably won't end well. In that scenario, you have a technology score of a 5, but your people and process are a 1. You don't have the experience yet. You really don't have the knowledge, or you really shouldn't be driving the sports car, but there's nothing stopping you from doing so. Same thing happens in tech. I'm sure if you guys are techs on this call, you know what the Microsoft Secure Score is. It's a built-in system. Microsoft lets you see what things you can do to make your environment more secure. Also, in case you weren't aware, you can click through them and go through the recommended actions and fix them all. One of the previous clients I have, they got a new practice manager who happened to have a tech background, and you know exactly the type I'm talking about. Those ones that know enough just to be dangerous. So what Mr. Danger is my middle name over here decided to do, we don't need a hardening project. I'm just going to go through the secure score and apply all of them without understanding or knowing what the controls did. And as you can guess, they ended up causing interruption. He locked himself out of the tenant with the conditional access policy. So now we have people who can't work, there's downtime, and then it costs additional work to revert those changes. So with this, we need to take a step-by-step intentional approach to increase the maturity. These things don't happen overnight. So again, whether we're aligning ourselves as the MSP to this or our clients, this is something that needs to be worked on over time. Additionally, one thing we like to show is after an initial assessment, we show, hey, this is kind of where you're at. So get this nice little arrow here to show exactly where they're at. So the next couple of slides here, this is going to be kind of the secret sauce behind it. If you are a CIS practitioner, you are probably familiar with some of the controls. So what we're doing is we basically made CIS made easy. And we've broken them down into the 5 stages. So we see where these controls fall on the people, the process, and the technology. And to start off in level 1, these are the following controls that we have. Not all of these tie directly to a CIS control, but these are essential starting points. And some of these are broad, not requiring much depth. So patch management at the top, for example, doesn't mean you're applying each and every update. It just means, hey, your patches are applied automatically, or there's some sort of automatic procedure in place. If you don't disable Windows updates, you probably meet this at level 1, but something you want to look into is like third-party patching or like firewall switch, things like that. Other than that, you're doing basic things. MFA, you're having your EDR, your MDR, doing security awareness training, doing an external email notice. That's one of those things considered a free win. So that way we can quickly get buy-in on this and show progress. 321 backups, or you could say 3210 now with the immutable. And then having vulnerability visibility. Vulnerability management is a whole other topic. All we're looking for at this point is we just need to be aware of what vulnerabilities can exist in your environment so we can action them. The one that I want to highlight on this, though, is the designated security officer. When we're talking with our clients, and obviously hoping that they're a managed client, or if they already are, we're taking care of a lot of this for them. But ultimately, it is their environment, their data, their responsibility. So when it comes to cybersecurity, there is a ownership that they need to take. And again, that's where we have some of these controls are something they have to do and accomplish. And this designated security officer is one. It's the person at the organization who raises their hand and say, "Yep, that's me." Typically, might be your POC. It's somebody you're going to work with involving anything around security. But on their role, though, they need to be the champion of the security in the organization. So, assisting with building that cyber culture. And it plays an important role, as we'll see in the next couple of levels. But starting off with here, why are we starting with these? So the driver for that first level, especially if because they don't all follow CIS, is the insurance requirements. They're going to be the leading cause. Most of the providers are going to require those controls to be in place to be covered or to be able to file a claim. And in addition, I mean, we've had just a couple of our friends from the cyber insurance. The more coverage you have, lowers your risk level. You can potentially qualify for better premiums, lower premiums, all that fun stuff. And the reason those are required is those controls address the most commonly exploited vulnerabilities. Most of the time, I mean, the cyber criminals are going to look for the weak, easy targets. I mean, same thing as if you look at physical security. If you lock your car, but your neighbor's car is left unlocked, your neighbor's car poses a higher risk of theft just by applying that simple security measure. Same thing, MFA. As we get further into the journey, there's going to be more impactful controls. But again, when you're just starting to align to one, we need base level, we need easy buy-in, we need quick wins, we need free wins. And you see two of those controls are free. External email notice, you can easily do that. Designated security officer, somebody raising their hand. Bam, we've already marked off two. You're kind of gamifying it. You get those like achievement unlocked or whatever you want to call it. You're making progress. But with that, though, there's also obviously security program challenges. Increasing maturity isn't as simple as just buying some software, buying a tool and installing it or deploying it. There's some challenges that are going to come with this implementation. So having the understanding that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility in the organization. Something that I'm passionate about, and need to break that stereotype of the IT guy that hides in the server room all day. Being in the managed service provider, I mean, we're providing a service. So it's really hard to not have that communication or kind of be that behind the scenes external, like being forefront, especially around cybersecurity. It requires that effective communication, needs to be front and center. Making sure that people are aware of what changes are going on. There's no surprises. Handling complaint. People don't like change, but if we combat it, if we already have that established relationship of helping rather than harming, or not just saying no all the time and restricting all of this, leading with education, definitely helps when it comes to rolling these things out. Also, getting buy-in for like the training, focusing on rewards or gamifying the training program tends to get better results. The one thing that too, like working with the POC is it's like, hey, well, what should I do, if people don't take their trainings and things like that? And it's usually one of the things that get brought up is like public humiliation or, writing them up or terminating them. And obviously it's their business, so they can make those choices. But, I always tell them is like just leading, with rewards. Like with my three kids, typically if I tell them, hey, clean up, if we clean up, we're going to go to the playground, they get excited and they do that rather than, hey, clean up, or you're going to lose your toys. And if you guys have kids, sometimes those toys get taken away anyway. So the option still needs to be on the table, but not what we should lead with. And then communication also helps with the rollout too. So getting into change control obviously is another topic, but if you're rolling out a new tool or something, icons change, new things might potentially block access. So if they know what changes are made and what to expect, then we can quickly overcome those as well. So we're going to go back to the model here and finish out the rest of the controls. So we're going to go to level two. So compared to level two, and as we get to higher levels, the controls are more in depth and they directly correlate to the specific CIS controls. Going back one level, we have that designated security officer. So now we take the next step in the maturity and we're going to document the rest of the incident response personnel. So who are the key stakeholders? Who are the vendors that need to be involved? Getting those numbers and everything kind of documented in a who to call checklist. A lot of controls in this level are starting with policies and process that dictate the controls that we're going to implement in the future controls. And some of these are going to be continued insurance requirements. So again, trying to simplify it. When I say next gen firewall, really what you're doing is something that has IDS, IPS, your security capabilities, because that's a direct CIS control. But putting it in terminology that everyone can understand. DNS filtering, doing a tenant hardening project, so like your Microsoft or Google tenant hardening. Along with that, you're doing a mobile deployment management deployment, and then can the incident response personnel, and you're starting those policies, disaster recovery plan, business continuity plan, financial controls. There are some cyber insurance out there, and obviously you'll have to check. And I'm not an insurance broker, but I've worked closely with some that if you don't have like a wire fraud policy or wire transfer policy in place and you fall victim to wire fraud, they have not covered it. So again, putting that as part of the policy stack of what every business needs, and then geofencing as another part of the hardening follows your CIS controls. Before we go any further, are there any questions on these, or should we just keep going over the controls?
Sure, I have a question, Josh.
Yeah.
You started out with CMMs with 5 levels of CMMC, or was that just 5 levels of maturity?
Just
We're not,
5 levels of maturity. We're not getting to CMMC, not touching it.
sorry, I saw the cybersecurity maturity. Okay, good.
Yeah, well, yeah. See, I know a CMMC is the cyber maturity model. I can't remember what the extra C stands for, but it's we're not we're not reinventing the wheel. When I say, hey, we have a cybersecurity maturity model, and it's something that's already in place. It's not, maybe I need a better branding name for it or something, but really, it's a model that shows maturity over time and kind of showing that people process technology that needs to equally be worked on.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah.
your own invention, your terminology and you're showing how this maps to controls, and it's great. I really
Yep.
appreciate it. I just
Yeah,
want to
no
make sure
problem.
I use it. Thank you.
Yep. So all of this, the underlining thing that the framework we're following is CIS, but as you go, we'll see, kind of towards the end that it's pretty easy to crosswalk. Our whole goal with this is not to like, we're not going to get you, 100% CIS implemented. Our whole goal is to build a strong base level of cyber maturity. So if you do need to follow a specific regulatory compliance, it's extremely easy to crosswalk to whatever that is. Our MSP, if you guys are not aware of the GTIA, formerly CompTIA Trustmark, it's relatively new within the last couple of years. But what they did is they made a program for MSPs based off of CIS, NIST, and some of their own ones. But it's a regulatory compliance standard specifically built for IT providers and MSP. Because if you're looking again, if you know CIS, there is a entire control about like software development, and most of us at MSPs, we're not building our own code or building our own software. So Section 16, the application software security doesn't really pertain to a lot of us. So they're removing that and then moving things in that are specific to MSPs. But before that, because we aligned to CIS and this maturity model, we were like, as you'll see, we were like a somewhere in a middle of a level 4. We were easily able to crosswalk and get the trust mark because we had most of these in place. And same thing if we were had to go through another regulatory compliance. And this is our whole goal for our clients as well, is building a strong base level of security so you can easily meet the specifics, whatever they might be. So we'll go ahead and go to level 3. So important thing with level 3 is this is where we recommend all businesses to be, regardless of size, vertical, regulatory requirements, etc. There's obviously no such thing as being too secure, but meeting all controls from level 1 to 3 gives you that great baseline of maturity. And again, we're still building off of each other. So we're taking baby steps here. Level 1, we have those backups in place, but now we have to test those backups on a reoccurring basis. Going back to the designated security officer, we have that in level 1. Now in level 2, we have the personnel. So we know who's involved. Now that we have all of that, we can now make the incident response plan and show who's doing what in those things. And if you're building an incident response plan, if you skip ahead and start with that at level 3, well, in that process, you're going to have a designated security officer. You're going to have to figure out who that personnel is. So this doesn't need to be followed in order per se. And especially some of your tool stacks, you might cover things. Hey, this will cover something in 4, but we might not be at a full level 1. That's completely fine. It's one of those where it's just meant to guide you on the journey. Um, Also, we're still adding building blocks to this as we increase ours. So, like asset management, this is the first time we see that. At this level, it's just produce me a list of hardware, software assets. So again, partner with a MSP. Typically, our RMM tool can cover that. But then we increase our maturity, there's going to be more of a process involved with that. So getting into level 4, we start seeing some of these more advanced ones, but we're still building off of it. So we can going back to asset management. Now, not only do we have to produce that list, but we're doing a quarterly review of that assets, and that might involve more responsibility on the client's side. Now that we have quite a few security tools deployed, we look at putting a SIM to gather all of those logs from the tools we have put in place. Again, going back to if you just skip ahead and you deploy that SIM, well, if you don't have those processes and you don't have those tools in place, then it's not time to put that in there. Penetration testing is also where I put at this level. I have quite a few friends that work at offensive security firms and nothing but respect for them. But one of my gripes is too often pen testing is thought of the first step to being more secure. Oh, I want to start a security program or I want to be more secure. Let's do a pen test. If you're not aligned to a framework such as this, you can save $15,000 or more. Um, Once you have the decent security program in place, that's when pen tests are great to see any remaining gaps or things that need to be closed up. But it's not something that I would start with because if you don't have these things in place from levels 1 to 3, some of the things in 4, I mean, that's what they're going to find and point out. So get there first and then do that pen test towards the end is, I think, the best way to go about it. Lastly, going into 5, these are going to cover the last remaining CIS controls. These are things in like IG3, and some might not even be useful for organizations unless they're in a heavily regulated industry. A lot of the times, we actually leave this slide off because if your client is, a level 1, you can kind of have some information overload, but some of these just might not make sense. Like you don't need to air gap if you don't have a regulatory requirement to. Also, these are taking significant process and time. Asset inventory now, instead of quarterly, is reviewed weekly. So unless you have an automated process involved, it takes quite a bit of time. Some of these are just kind of a significant thing to implement. They can lower risk. They're great to have, but again, it goes back to that, cow analogy. Is the risk that this is lowering worth the investment on this? But rounding out, this is your level 5. So getting into the last part of the slide here, then we'll kind of get into the discussions. Now that you've seen the steps and controls, what's next? So, sorry, that framework that we have now, this is your blueprint. Another pet peeve that I have is how some places do assessments. Some will do like a vulnerability scan, or even worse, they will do an external vulnerability scan and call it a penetration test. Some are just sending a list of questions and they have the client fill it out and align the responses. And that's not an assessment. It's a self-guided attestation. This framework now can be your assessment criteria. So when you're bringing on clients or you're doing prospects, you really, whether you're deploying tools to find this out or even just going through and asking them, you easily see what they have in place and building off of that. It also helps you align your tool stack and your project offering. It helps with the tool sprawl. As we all know, there's a SaaS application for everything. We all get hit up by different vendors, new vendors every day in our email or cold calls or LinkedIn. So there's literally an application for everything. But if you just kind of go through each of them or pick and choose, you really don't know what you're solving for. So again, this is your blueprint. and you can have your service offerings and tool set aligned to the framework. So again, what I've done is taken this model and basically this tool solves for these controls, level 1, 2, 3, etc. So that way we know if a new tool has to enter the stack, it either has to follow those or meet those, or meet one that we're not doing, things like that. And it also allows for swapping out those tool sets as needed. They're not going to solve every control. This is going to show what projects need to be completed and budgeted for. Like a tenant hardening, you can have tools help you with that, but ultimately that's more than likely going to be a project. So that's where your NRR comes in, showing what needs to be done. And then lastly, again, you have your blueprint, and this is utilized in QBRs. So you're showing progress. The client knows exactly where they are, where they started, and what next looks like for those. So this is really like, the starting building your security program, and then everything else kind of ties in and revolves around that. So that is what we have for aligning to a framework, and how it's done. Any questions or discussions? I will stop sharing and open the floor. I see a bunch of chats now, so let me go through those here.
When you're free, Josh.
There are now states requiring you to pick a framework for insurance um, purposes. So when we've run into that, because again, this maturity model is, hey, it's built off of CIS, we say that we're aligning to CIS. Let's see, anything else I meant? Transfer, accept, and remove risk. There's only 4 risk strategies that exist. Yes, insurance is only a transfer of risk. What Josh isn't telling you. Perfect. Okay, so um, do the states care what you choose doesn't have an impact? In my experience, no, unless you're in a regulated industry. Like obviously, if you're regulated by HIPAA, then you have to follow HIPAA. There's no, kind of way around that at all. So I think, just aligning to a framework and talking with like cyber insurance. I work closely with Fifth Wall, for example. That's kind of one of the things that like, hey, what, are you aligned to a framework? What do you, and if you say CIS, I mean, that's a great one. So, yes, let me just post level 3 in the chat and make it easier if it lets me. So, while I'm doing that, any other questions?
Josh,
Yes.
from Josh, actually. So, or one of the Joshes. Uh, a great taxonomy. I like the way you chose the Venn diagram solution to illustrate this, and I think the taxonomy is good. The process you put together is much better than I have. However, the thing we haven't tackled and that's hardest is how to get customers engaged. And there really is no magic bullet. I know that, of course, I thought that cyber liability was going to be the magic bullet, insurance bullet. I thought that compliance was going to be the magic bullet, something that would wake them from their torpor or stupor. And none of those things have worked. What we experienced is that most of our clients decided not to get cyber liability insurance because it would require doing this, being serious about it. And with compliance, the only compliant exposed company we have is the CMMC client, and he's still bearing his head 3 years later, doing nothing that we know of anyway.
Yep.
And he has told me, this is out of your hands. Don't bother me. I'm not getting any headway here, but a lot of our sites have moved through a lot of what you've talked about here in terms of tools and to some extent process. Everybody's MFA'd, everybody's segmented. We do vulnerability and patching, or vulnerability management and patching, just because we do, not because they're interested in having us do it. Where we hit the wall is somebody on site. We just call it a site contact. Most of them don't even want to provide that. They still have this attitude that this is our problem, not theirs. And that's the leap we have to make, because nothing we do can secure them against themselves.
Yep.
That's the hard thing.
Yeah. I mean, for this, we do have a couple co-managed clients as well, and I think the more usefulness on it is it allows them like a roadmap to be built out and a budget to be built out. Now, obviously, our every MSP is different, and we are a larger MSP, and some of our clients are a little bit bigger, but we do have a handful that are, have been kind of grandfathered in, or smaller, that, aren't even meeting level one. And after, kind of continual, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this. And obviously this is a privileged place and you can't do this with everybody, but if someone's not willing to increase their maturity and stay at a high risk, then we've had to have the hard conversations and say, hey, you're too much of a risk to keep on as a client. Like, we're not improving your security, and by staying still, we're actually moving backward as these threats evolve. So I recognize that not everyone is able to do that depending on where they're at in their MSP career, but um, in any case, it still, shows them, hey, this is what we need to do. This is, based off of framework, et cetera. And continually like, hey, this is on the roadmap. And I think the better way to talk about it too is, looking at, like, if you go to a doctor and they, whatever their plan is, hey, we can do physical therapy or surgery or whatever, they're laying out the options and giving you a path, but they're not saying that not doing these is an option. Now, you as a patient obviously have that. You can ignore them, you could say no, but they're not really giving you, they're like, hey, this is the path we can take. We can go this way, we can go this way. And this really lines it out. Like, the client can say no to this, but we're not really giving them that option. It is, this is what we're doing to increase your maturity. Here is the next steps. And, what do we want to tackle next? Here's the things in level two. The tenant hardening, that's going to be a project. It's going to be significant. We need a budget for it, but we don't have the budget for it. What are some, things that we can tackle that, from a strategic level? Well, that incident response personnel, okay, we can build that out. Like, it might take a little bit of labor, but we're doing something that doesn't involve a project or doesn't involve another tool. It's just documenting. And now, yeah, you can have a tool. I mean, we use compliance scorecard for the policies. They're fantastic. But if you don't have that, I mean, that's a Word document. There's other ways around meeting these. And that's the beauty of aligning to the framework, is regardless of the budget, regardless of resource constraints, there's still something in here that you can take strides for that don't involve buying a tool, doing a project. I mean, it's just a matter of how you want to strategically approach these.
Thank you. I appreciate your addressing it. Is the Centrex out of Southern Cal, Poway?
Yeah, yep, headquartered in San Diego.
Okay, Poway.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, and are you in Temecula or are you in San Diego?
I am in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so I get
Oh,
to hear about how great the weather is every day when I hop onto the morning
how
call.
about that?
So,
Okay.
I would say we have
As you
about,
should. As you should.
I get to visit a handful of times a year. But we have about, I would say, 60% or so of our workforce is located in that area for on-sites and stuff, and then 40% of us are fully remote. And kind of same with our client spread. Over half of them are located in that Southern California region, but we do have, quite a sprawl of clients that are, we have some that are in the DC area, New Jersey, Chicago, up the coast a little further. So, um, that's kind of our operating area. And to Kevin's points, the framework's fairly open to implementation. That's kind of exactly the point. I mean, going back to that second one where it's like all models are wrong, but some are useful. Like, the CIS, the NIST, you're looking at it and it's like, well, how do you apply to this? And we've kind of thrown out the window, and we're basically like, this is, depending on your level of what you want to say, is this is like CIS for dummies or CIS made easy. It's just building a base level, and that's kind of all we're after. And if you build that base level, uh, you're going to be in a great spot.
So CIS is the strategy. These are the tactics. You've
Yep.
actually mapped it down to actionable steps, which is always the challenge, and that's great. And you can even extend that to the point where you have your own tool stack, but you could build a matrix where you could say, look, this tactic to address this strategy requires potentially this, that, or the third party tool. And that's that whole mapping and weaving it together is what we do if we're lucky and get that right. So you said Sioux Falls or South Dakota.
Yep.
The advantage you have over San Diego, I would say, is primarily that if 3,000 people on Chopper show up, it's good news. That's the thing
Uh,
South Dakota has, but you're
yeah.
both SD. Uh, do you have a document when you engage with companies to first get into this process? Do you have an introductory document or a signatory document where you say, here's the road we're going to travel? Do you engage them that formally in this process?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that we go about it when we're prospecting. So we lead by a paid security assessment, and going back on to my gripe of the security assessments, how we do ours is we do use some various tools, but we're actually going in and looking at the configurations, how things are set up, what your AD looks like, what your Microsoft 365 tenant looks like, what things are and are not enabled, and then looking at doing like a one-time phishing campaign. Obviously, we're doing vulnerability scans as well. It is important to do, and then looking at network infrastructure and all of those. But as part of that too, there is a questionnaire that gets sent out to the person, and it's asking the things that I can't find out using the tools. So really, what I'm doing in that assessment is looking for critical things, but I'm aligning to that exact maturity model. I'm going through level 1 through 5 and putting check marks on what they have and what they don't have. And then part of the assessment is basically showing, hey, this is where you're at, this is where you need to be, and then recommending, projects, roadmaps, and everything around that. If we don't do the paid engagement, if somebody just wants to, typically we do the paid engagement and then goes into becoming an MRR client. So if somebody skips that assessment, we're still doing like a network discovery, but as part of the onboarding call or the proposal, we're still aligning them, but we're not going through like this whole 5 presentation. We will have like 2 slides of it in there, and then we're obviously going over other. We have our kind of our proposal documentation. However, when they get in, there is a meeting that I have, kind of that first like QBR, get to know your VCIO, get to know me. Then we do have kind of this presentation to show that how we're aligning them to the framework. So it does get introduced fairly early. And again, this is our blueprint for kind of everything. So every QBR, they're able to see, where they're at on the levels and what's next, and have the roadmaps. I mean, I know I brought it up a couple weeks ago, but we use VCIO Toolbox. So within there, you build out budgets and roadmaps. So again, it's like, hey, level 2, these are what we need to get there, and it's visible. So this is really dictated at every part of the engagement, from pre-assessment to onboarding to current to future state.
You really are engaging with much more mature businesses, whether they're larger or not. You are engaging with more mature businesses, and that's excellent. There's nothing better than getting buy-in when it comes to security and behaviors.
Yep.
OPSEC mindset. It's so hard to teach.
Yep. And that's kind of our target market, and we're lucky in that is like, for example, startups, we usually don't get them when they first hit the ground. We get them when, they get the funding and they're ready to mature and increase their operational maturity level. So, standardizing processes, following ITIL, things like that. But the MSPs that I've worked at previously to Centrix, I mean, the most recent one I worked at in the Sioux Falls area, their target market was mom and pop shops, 1 to 20 users. They had a handful that were, maybe around the 50 mark. The largest one was 200. So these are really smaller. And I applied the same thing. It was a different strategy around how we're accomplishing these things, because we obviously have much lower budgets and resources available,
Did,
especially at the state county level. It's leaning into what CISA offers, what state level, offering. And it was really more of a tactical approach than, hey, uh, where we're at now. It was a lot harder. I mean, I'll be the first to say that. It is easier when you have, more of the resources and more of the spend available. But again, I feel that this applies to any organization, regardless of size. And
did
that's why I
you
said, go ahead.
did you just refer to a 50 user site as a mom and pop business, or did I misunderstand you?
Well, those were the outliers. I would say the mom and pops that we had, or I would say 1 to maybe 20 at the largest.
Oh,
So
okay. I'm sorry.
no,
Thanks, Connor.
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Y-
I'm trying to level set, because in our market, about 97% of businesses have a little more than that, have less than 20 employees. And depending on where you are in your metro, as sparsely populated as South Dakota is, which usually leads to things like tiny businesses, you guys have a tremendous concentration of everything from finance to defense to energy and all kinds of large businesses in a sparsely populated state. You're unique in the United States for that. So,
Yeah, Sioux Falls is actually there's quite a few tech and cyber growing. We have one of the top cybersecurity colleges in Dakota State University. They're
mm,
about an hour away from Sioux Falls. We have quite a bit of like a lot of banks, a lot of fintech coming here, a lot of agriculture stuff. So like Sioux Falls in that area is rather large, but the rest of the state is by and far, like you said, sparse. I mean, working with counties. There was one county we had that their highway patrol and their sheriff, they each operated out of their own Hotmail accounts. And obviously that's not good. But like to me,
yeah,
I mean, if I get an email from the sheriff and it's like, whatever county sheriff at hotmail.com, like I'm laughing. That's clearly spam, right? But that's
Right.
how they operated. And it's like,
no,
hey,
that's only because they didn't let them use their AOL accounts. Yeah, yeah, you're totally on the right page there. We tried to deal with county sheriffs for a while in New Mexico, and not a one of them had 1 out of 10 on our score sheet for security.
yep.
And many did use AOL, Prodigy, and other such email addresses as their official business. They owned their own phones. I mean, everybody had bring your own everything. And that
Yep.
was their answer, their solution. And we never could engage them because they just couldn't make that leap. It was, as I called it, fire to the caveman. It just wasn't. All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you. This is great. It's a very interesting presentation in taxonomy, and I'd like to learn more about this. Are you going to share your email address with us, or is that a
Yeah,
step?
I can throw that in there. You can find me on LinkedIn. But if you want to shoot me an email as well, there it is. Perfect. All right, Connor, you said you were going to send me some hard questions here. What do you got? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yes, he is, Connor.
Super hard to answer that question.
Let me go copy paste. Gotta ask AI real quick.
So while he's bringing those questions in, I am here now. I'm sorry for my late arrival. Had a scheduling conflict. I'm on vacation.
I'm gonna say the other
So
Dan looks a lot better than you, bro.
yeah,
But I was
exactly.
thinking, I was thinking you were
Exactly.
looking a little feminine earlier.
Right, exactly. That's what vacation does to you. You just start relaxing so as it looks like Connor has got something
Yeah,
in there right now, but I just want to say thank you to Josh for doing an incredible job on this presentation, and so
thank you.
round of applause for you. So let's go ahead and jump into Connor's question here. Is there a security framework that rules them all that folks should consider? I know many modern frameworks borrow, copy directly from NIST, CSF, but would be curious of hearing your thoughts.
So clearly the answer is the one that I just presented. That's the one that rules them all.
Yes, right.
Um, and that's kind of why, I put that like there's, all models are wrong, but some of them are useful because again, like let's say, hey, I'm going to align to CIS as an MSP. We take Control 16. We don't develop software. None of that is relevant to us. And some of the other things in there just aren't relevant to how we do business. With NIST too, I mean, NIST is like pretty overwhelming and it's really open to interpretation. So you just pick one and do the best you can because again, I would be hard pressed to find any industry or any business that is we're 100% aligned because 100% aligned to whose interpretation of it because some of those we can sit and argue. One of the things in our Trustmark working groups that we've had is like, well, what does this control even mean? What, like, how are you applying it? And you ask 8 different MSPs and they're doing it 8 different ways. So really the whole point of it is we're just trying to reach a base level. And even with we do have a handful of clients that are in regulated industries. we align them to us, we get them to level 3, 4, and it's like, cool, you need a HIPAA audit. We're going to work with a specific HIPAA auditor. I know quite a bit about HIPAA, but I'm not qualified. I'm not doing it. Not only that, I feel it's a conflict of interest as well. I mean, if we're in charge of managing the environment, we also shouldn't be assessing it based on those. But just pick one. I mean, I'm partial to kind of what we did. CIS is a good starting point. NIST is a little bit more in depth, a little harder, but just more complex to follow. But just pick one and start doing the basics on that.
Isn't it
Let's
the
see.
case that
Go
only
ahead.
CIS is really prescriptive and actually changes regularly? CIS tells you what to do. You get
Mhm.
conceptually, you pick up from NIST or CSF, and I only know anything about those, but those give you a rough idea or conceptually what to do. CIS is much more do the following. And
Yep.
I like it for that reason, and it seems to update frequently and it stays current. So to me, it feels like the right stepping stone.
Cyber insurance is doing more harm than good. Is it actually leveling people up to qualify for policy or allowing people to justify poorly implemented security? What I mean, I guess kind of a little bit of both is like, hey, well, we have cyber insurance, so we don't need to worry about that. And I think that comes to a little bit more of the client education side. And this is one of the things that I do, plugging with the IR games that I know I've talked about too, is even if you have insurance, like it still sucks to go through an incident. And are you truly going to be covered? Hey, you're covered for 1 million, 2, 3. A, is that enough? B, is it the right type of coverage? Like you're transferring some of the risk, but you're not eliminating it to it fully. Like you still have to follow these things. And with insurance, it's one of those things where you have to have, but you hope to never have to use. Right? So it's something you have in your back pocket. What I guess the thing that I align it to more is it's as closest do we have to a regulatory compliance that we're going to get at this time. And I know there's arguments on both sides about, we, have more regulation, more government controls or less, depending on how you feel on that. But to me, and one of the things like that, I'll be the first to say it as an MSP, we need to be held more responsible. We have so many keys to the kingdom. If we are compromised, it's not just one business that a threat actor gets access to. It's us and all of our clients. And the simple fact that my neighbor right now, who knows nothing about computers, who might have built a computer and that's it, can start an MSP, like to me, that's ridiculous. So there has to be some sort of level, some sort of qualification, and that's where it's like I'm hoping the trust mark takes off or educating about aligning to a framework because if you're going to start like you got to kind of know what you're doing. So that's where I feel like the insurance comes in is it's providing a low level regulatory compliance. And if you don't have it, it sucks.
All right, there's another question.
And can I put a reference to the NSITSP in your chat? There was a question from Connor, and we're a lot of what we're talking about is kind of their mission is to bring this professionalism. What you just said, Josh, they're out there to try to bring professionalism to the industry and help hopefully shape regulation to make sense as it comes down the pipe
Yep.
for us. But I agree with you. Anybody can be an MSP. It's a lot harder to be a hairdresser or
Yeah.
a therapist.
Well, yeah, your barb, being a barber like it's pretty hard to get that regulated. Like even, I mean, I think to be a taxi driver, well, not Lyft or Uber, but like an actual taxi, I think if I remember right, there's some sort of certification. Hell, to drive a Zamboni, you have to be certified. There is more regulation that goes into driving a damn Zamboni than there is starting an MSP. So,
Yeah,
and
it's pretty terrifying.
to Connor's point too, if the industry at large does not formally adopt a framework, will federal or state regulation demand it? I feel that it's only a matter of time. Because I mean, that's the story with insurance and kind of how it started and with the whole seatbelt thing. Seatbelts were required, not really. I mean, obviously it was a safety thing, but they were required because the insurance companies are having to pay out a lot more. So it all comes, I mean, the mighty dollar, is going to rule everything. And if we keep having to pay out, I think eventually, or, more and more businesses get compromised and see losses. That's where I think that, hey, this is going to come down. And I would rather have a framework come from industry professionals that know what they're talking about rather than some, representative that is tasked with that. So I'm hoping that we are allowed to be a kind of a self-regulated industry, but it'll be interesting to see how it kind of plays out.
Okay. Yeah,
It-
yeah, big
Be-
question.
Before we jump into a couple of the other questions there, one thought I had you were talking about earlier, and hopefully you didn't cover this already, just due to my lateness. But when we take a look at, who is the ideal customer, of course, there are many things that we look at that include, are they, committed to technology, truly embracing it, and, they're going to make the proper investments. Those are some aspects of what we look for. But when we take a look at the security, their security maturity, I think for the most part in our head calculate where they fall in whether they should be a client or not. But do you guys have, and that question is for Josh, or does anybody else have something more formalized when looking at their security maturity and just more of a formal calculator to determine whether or not they are a fit for us to have as a client?
I mean, where we're going, we're almost looking for any excuse to disqualify the client, for whatever
Right.
reason. But again, going back to like when a lot of our clients that we get, especially from referrals, is they're ready, that they don't have formal processes in place. They're kind of beginner and they're ready to invest and take that leap and increase their operational maturity. They just don't know how. And that's kind of where we come in. So we're not going to turn somebody away for not having great security. It'll obviously be brought up, and if they're willing to invest and improve their security, then we would, be the fit and help them with that. Where it doesn't work is if they're not interested and they want to do kind of the break fix, or they're, not willing or able to kind of invest, then we do walk away. Being as, again, coming from a privileged place, I completely understand this. We do have a minimum spend that does disqualify some smaller businesses, but again, I completely understand that not all MSPs can afford to do that, depending on where they're at in their life cycle. But again, at some point, especially when you're trying to grow your MSP and you're looking at operational efficiency, not all revenue is good revenue.
Right. And I think that is the risk, though, is that, we're too eager for any revenue. And, before too long, we're looking at a slew of customers that we think we really should fire them. So why take them on even to start with? I mean, it might be a longer, especially if you're more in that growing phase of your overall MSP maturity. Um, Walking away from a client might be a bit more difficult because you're dropping some potential revenue, but in the long term, it's really the right thing to do. Others have thoughts on that?
So a lot of us have learned to become more expert at winnowing the chaff. I don't think I know a MSP better at firing customers, which is sad to say, because so few will engage at even the most basic level. However, it's always been a little bit, I hate to use this phrase because of what's going on right now, but if we provide them the tools to self-deport, I have found that it's better than firing. We do things like minimum spends. 100% of our security package has to be at every site. Now, that doesn't mean everybody has to take user training, which is in it, but it has to be made available and they have to make that effort. So we found that just by not flexing on things like MFA and whatnot, we are getting there. Now it's making sure nobody's a local admin anywhere and switching over to auto elevate for that, which is its own new battle. We lost 3 sites over MFA. We'll probably lose 3 sites over local admin. The reason this is such a bad situation, IT security, is there are really brilliant people using really powerful tools to hammer on businesses that couldn't give a shit to be more, to be highly active. They just don't see it. They don't feel it. They don't believe it. the discussions I've had and the being yelled at this week about insisting they be a local admin, can't wait for somebody to approve something in a few minutes to have their anyway, to have their privilege elevated. I shouldn't be having these discussions in 2025, but I'm not really sure until there's a bigger understanding in our user base of how serious this is. Even though nobody else will say that on this call, the reality is I'm not getting there. We're not winning this battle.
No,
It is-
I'll say it. I
Yeah.
will 100% back you. There's, until people have a financial loss, they
Yeah.
seem to just think it's never going to happen to them.
Yep.
Yeah,
Even after they had a financial loss,
I agree.
pain.
Yep, we had one like that. They had been decimated, and they hired us back on after firing us because we insist upon this. And 3 years later, they let us go. And 1 year later, they were decimated. And no, they don't necessarily learn. If they survive it, especially if they're insured and they get paid out, they just do the same stupid stuff sometimes.
I had
Agreed.
a client get fished and lose 300 grand, and they still won't take the free security awareness training we gave them.
That's
I
great.
just fired a client. I mean, I told him to go elsewhere because I couldn't deal with he was telling me how to secure his environment. He's the expert, not my company. And I said, you know
Yeah.
what? As you would say, Josh, you're not worth the risk to me. I think it's time we both move on.
Yep.
And he finally did. And by the way, he had a breach last month. He had a phishing scam, got hacked for 100,000. I think he got most of it back, but what about the headache that he had trying to recoup from this and the way it affected his operations? Doesn't care. And he's a multi-million-dollar organization.
Yeah,
Not, 1, 2, we're talking in the 20, $30 million range. Doesn't give a crap. He knows better.
you're right. That our most challenging remaining client is in that range, and they had 4 of their clients four staff fall for different phishing emails over a year. Before we enforced MFA, they threatened to fire us. And I said, see me in court. You have a 2-year on your
Yep.
contract. We're not going to not do this. They still won't allow the users to take user training. And I got the FBI cyber guy come out and talk to their CFO and CEO. And he spent an hour and a half with him, and he finished up telling him MFA, user training, and listen to your MSP. He leaves, and the first words out of the CEO's mouth were, "That's all bullshit." You can't break
Yep.
it. Yeah.
It, those, I mean, yeah, they're out there. Those things happen, but it's up to us to keep fighting the good fight. And as annoying as it is, I mean, we just, we got to keep on, keeping on. But we all have our stories. I mean, there is a client again at one of my previous MSPs that it just drove me up a wall every time I would go there. I mean, their backup was a NAS that was attached to this lady's computer. They were using it was like pop email through their internet service provider because it was free and not going to M365. And every time I would go there, no matter what, I'd say, hey, we need to evaluate, there's risk, like there's high risk here. These things can happen, yada, yada. Oh, they'll never happen. Oh, they'll never happen. Well, eventually one day she clicks on a phishing email and it gets to the point where she didn't enter her credentials. But I was like, you don't understand how lucky that you got. Like that would have been it. There is no backup. You're using pop email. Like that would have been it. And oh, I learned my lesson. I will never do it again. Well, guess who did it again 2 weeks later? And like, they couldn't get through to them because for whatever reason. And then there was one of their project engineers, surprise, surprise, using pop email, the PST or ODST, whatever file corrupted. He lost all of his emails, and I was like, that's it. They're gone. There's no backup. And he's like, what do you mean, Meg? He was like upset. He's like, that's all my work. That's all my projects I've been working on. I'm like,
Sucks to be you.
unfortunately, like your management does not want to employ like the proper policy. Like there's nothing we can do. And they still didn't do it. It's,
I mean, most people are just a glutton for punishment, right? I mean, you take a look, a conversation I had with Amanda Makowski. She's a solutions engineer for ThreatLocker. One of the things she said is when she was an MSP, she'd get those calls and it would be the same end users that call back and say, guess what I clicked on again? And, the keyword is again. And, and of course, like she said, we're here to serve, we're here to take care of them because, client service is important, but we also need to speak the reality to them of the damage that they can, either that they have done or the damage that they potentially could do. Going to Connor's question as far as the strategy for navigating, convenience versus security conversations. And, while this is not a show, like the end all be all, the conversations I've always had is, the easier we make it for ourselves, the easier we're making it for bad actors. And is that really what you want to do? And when it comes down to, well, it would never happen to me, Mr. Customer, let me introduce you to hypothetical. Obviously, we don't want to share organization names, but let me introduce you to some actual examples of small businesses, just like yours, that have experienced this. And I think we need to stay away from these grandiose numbers that you're going to lose $1 billion.
$1 billion. Yeah, it's not a real number to them.
Yeah, because it's so big, it's so far-fetched that they're like, well, we don't even do, a tenth of that in sales. And so, I think they need to hear about small businesses just like them and how it's impacted them. That's the only way, because again, the small businesses, small and mid-sized companies don't get the media attention. They only hear about enterprise incidents. And to them, that's why I think is a contributing factor to it won't happen to me.
Yeah. The way I couch that is, NBC is not going to show up to do an expose on your 20-person business. You're not
Right.
a big enough story.
Yeah.
But you're,
And the-
just likely to target, and instead of you costing $1 billion, like that's your business. Like you're done.
Right.
I mean, do you have a backup plan? What is your backup plan?
Mhm.
There in Sioux Falls, there was last year, about a year and a half ago, there was a cafe that got hit with a cyber attack because they exposed their payment system to the internet, and threat actors got in, stole a bunch of credit card. I mean, hundreds of credit cards. But like, if a freaking cafe in Sioux Falls that serves maybe 1,000 people on a good week can be targeted, like there's no excuse for that.
Right.
And yeah, that's again one of my other passion projects that I do with IR Game, is just getting people's eyes to open on this. It's not just about the business. There's people involved. I mean, you have a 20-person business and you think you're too small. Like, what happens if you do? You're responsible for 19 other people's mortgages, lives, families. Are you willing to have that conversation and put that risk on you?
My
And-
least,
Yep.
my least favorite conversation always starts out with, we're too small to, and I like to look at people. I'm 5'7". I tell them, that's like me telling you that nobody's going to kick to my head. I'm too small. That's how most of my fights started when I was a fighter. Of course they're going to kick to your head.
Yeah.
They know they can reach it. That's the nature of being a small business. You're an easy target by definition. And
Yeah.
it's hard to sell that sometimes.
And unfortunately, we need to be obviously respectful, but we need to be blunt in as far as the true ramifications. In this falls into Connor's territory of security awareness training. But I mean, you take a look at the seriousness of that laptop or desktop that you put in front of that new end user, and that is a powerful tool that could make or break that organization. And if we're not properly training them about how to look out for things that could put them in a disastrous situation, then we're just failing. And today, anything could happen and anything will happen. And it's the good old cliche of, it's not a matter of if, it's when. So
to go with the, I mean, I know we're over, but to go with the security convenience real quick, I guess I've found success, and obviously this isn't a one size fits all, but just figuring out like what is the business process you're trying to do. I don't want to tell you no, but let's work together to figure out how we can do this securely, but still allow you to do it. One of our new provisioning techs here a couple weeks ago tried downloading a auto macro thing and got picked up by our EDR and all of this. And I was like, hey, this might be legitimate, but it's not on our allowed software list. So like, what are you trying to do? Let's figure out what you can do with our tools to automate some of this. Like, what's your angle? And he's like, well, I use this on my home PC for this. And it's like, okay, well, explaining the risk and things like that. And we're, exploring some of the automation we can do with our current tools. And same thing with the clients. I mean, instead of just, hey, no, like this is blocked. And obviously that's not how the conversations go all the time. But,
Right.
we understand that this might, take some time to adopt, but let's figure out how we can, do this so you can still, do your job.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Josh, you did an amazing job. I want to thank you for your time and knowledge and sharing with everyone today. Just a quick reminder, we host these calls every Wednesday. It's WTF Wednesday, and stands for What the Function. Each week we have a different business function expert, and next week we have Michelle Griffin with Griffin Resources. She's a human resources expert, and she's gonna be speaking next week, Wednesday. And then also each Friday at 12 noon Eastern time, also, we have our Build It Better MSP discussion group call. So it's your informal peer group where many of the same people that are in this call today join us, and we talk about successes, challenges, and just working to learn from each other. So with that being said, again, Josh, thank you. Great job today. And hope everybody has a great rest of your day. And we'll see you guys on Friday. Take care, everybody.
Go along.
See ya.